Open your Bibles, please, to Psalm 139. Psalm 139. This is one of my favorite psalms, and it's got some theology, it's got some emotion, it's got some challenges, it's got some responses to God. And so it's very, very beneficial to think through what David is talking about in this psalm. I'm going to read the entirety of the psalm for you, and then we'll run through it together. Psalm 139, notice the title for the choir director, a psalm of David. O Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know when I sit down and when I rise up. You understand my thought from afar. You scrutinize my path and my lying down, and are intimately acquainted with all my ways. Even before there is a word on my tongue, behold, O Lord, you know it all. You have enclosed me behind and before, and laid your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is too high. I cannot attain to it. Where can I go from your spirit, or where can I flee from your presence? If I ascend to heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in Sheol, behold, you are there. If I take the wings of the dawn, if I dwell in the remotest part of the sea, even there your hand will lead me, and your right hand will lay hold of me. If I say, surely the darkness will overwhelm me, and the light around me will be night, even the darkness is not dark to you, and the night is as bright as the day. Darkness and light are alike to you. For you formed my inward parts. You wove me in my mother's womb. I will give thanks to you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works, and my soul knows it very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in secret and skillfully wrought in the depths of the earth. Your eyes have seen my unformed substance, and in your book were all written the days that were ordained for me, when as yet there was not one of them. How precious also are your thoughts to me, O God! How vast is the sum of them! If I should count them, they would outnumber the sand. When I awake, I am still with you. Oh, that you would slay the wicked, O God! Depart from me, therefore, men of bloodshed, for they speak against you wickedly, and your enemies take your name in vain. Do I not hate those who hate you, O Lord? And do I not loathe those who rise up against you? I hate them with the utmost hatred. They have become my enemies. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my anxious thoughts, and see if there be any hurtful way in me, and lead me in the everlasting way. It's quite a psalm, isn't it? It's a beautiful psalm, and there's a lot going on. So I've written on the board a brief outline, and it goes something like this. In the first 6 verses, David is talking about the extent of God's knowledge, starting in verse 7 through verse 12, the extent of God's presence. And then he talks about the thoughts of God. And then there's a response to the truths that he's just uncovered and talked about. And then finally, in the last 2 verses, a prayer. But there's another structure going on, and I'll point it out to you now, and you can kind of watch for it as we go through. There's a change in attitude. The front half of the psalm has a little bit of almost resentment, almost a little bit of David is a little defensive. And then about halfway through, it begins to shift, and it turns into something much more beautiful. So let's take a look at it and go verse by verse. So starting out by talking about God's knowledge, and David says, O Lord, you have searched me and known me. The word translated search is a word that means to dig or to mine, like you're mining for gems or minerals or something. And the idea is that God has dug down through the layers, and he knows what's inside. There's no hiding. He's going to say that. He's going to say more about you can't hide. But you've searched me. You've dug through all the layers, and you know me. You know how much does God know? Well, God knows when I sit down and when I rise up. So when I sit down to eat breakfast, and then he knows when I get up. Furthermore, you understand my thought from afar. So from a long ways away, God fully perceives what it is I'm thinking about. He doesn't have to be in the same room with me physically to understand what I'm thinking. He knows from a long ways away. You scrutinize my path and my lying down and are intimately acquainted with all my ways. So God is watching, and he knows exactly what David is doing, the paths that he takes, and this is more than just the road that he's walking on. This refers to his life. God has studied David and is studying him, and he knows exactly how David behaves, how he thinks, how he acts. Now, take it a step farther, verse 4. Even before there is a word on my tongue, behold, O Lord, you know it all. So God knows what David is going to say before David knows what David is going to say. And you can begin to feel a little bit, David is feeling a little hemmed in, like, hey, where's my privacy? Can you get out of my mind? Can you get out of my life? A little bit. Not too much, but a little bit. Lord, you know it all, the end of verse 4. God knows everything there is to know about David. You have enclosed me behind and before and laid your hand upon me. What kind of a picture do you get from that verse? This is verse 5. What sort of a picture is in your head? Yeah, that's it, Shari. You're picturing, what did you have a gerbil or a hamster or something? So what was it? Both. They had both a hamster and a gerbil. Don't ask about how they ended. But you can picture a little hamster, a little furry critter, and you put a hand behind it, and you put a hand in front of it on the desk or whatever, and then somebody else puts a hand on top, and now you've got it trapped, it's captured. This is God doing the same thing with David, not a gerbil, but David. And with one hand behind him, with another hand in front of him, and with the other hand, does God have three hands? That's the point, is David is encircled. He's surrounded. And he says, such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It's too high. All that you know about me, I'm not sure I like it. I'm not sure that this is fair. Aren't I a free moral agent? Don't I get to make up my own mind? Don't I get to do what I want to do? And David is, you can sense it's not real solid, but there's a little bit of resentment. There's a little bit of, he's not sure he likes this too much. Look at verse 7. Where can I go from your spirit? So now we're talking about not just God's knowledge, but God's presence. So, we're going to expand now and talk about the presence of God. And David says, if I wanted to run away, if I wanted to run and hide from God, where could I go? In verse 7, where can I go from your spirit, or where can I flee from your presence? So now he's going to, metaphorically, he's going to, in his mind, he's going to try out different scenarios, see if this scenario would work to get away from God. Can you think of anybody else who tried to run from God? Jonah. Something like that. Now Jonah actually did it. David is just playing with this in his head. But, something like that is going on. In verse 8, here's one of the scenarios. If I ascend to heaven, you are there. So, climb a ladder that's 900 miles high. Get on a spaceship and fly to Mars. Go as high as you can. And God's there. He's there to open the door for you. If I make my bed in Sheol, Sheol is a Hebrew word for the grave or the pit or the depths of the earth. So you dig a tunnel as deep as you can dig it. Down. And finally, with the last shovelful of dirt, You say, there, I'm 9 miles down. And you look around and God is there. If I go to Sheol, you're already there. Or where can I flee from your presence? If I ascend to heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in Sheol, behold, you are there. If I take the wings of the dawn, I'm going to go east. I'm going to start flying east. If I dwell in the remotest part of the sea, probably what David means by that is something like Israelis thought of the Mediterranean Sea as west, because their land is right there, and the Med is to the west. In other words, he's saying, if I go west, if I go as far west as I can go, east, west, heaven, the earth, even there, verse 10, your hand will lead me, and your right hand will lay hold of me. So, east, west, up in the air, down in the dirt. He says, I can't go anywhere to get away from God because he's already there. So now he's going to try a couple more scenarios. This is, in some ways, it's almost funny, but you can sense that David's temperament, his disposition right now is not funny. But it is almost funny. It's like a 3-year-old who says, if I turn out all the lights, Daddy and Mommy can't see me. So he says, surely, verse 11, surely the darkness will overwhelm me and the light around me will be night. Turn off all the lamps, and now God can't see me. But that's not how it works. Even the darkness is not dark to you, and the night is as bright as the day. Darkness and light are alike to you. The U.S. military has spent and is spending hundreds of millions of dollars on night vision goggles for our soldiers to be able to see things at night. That's, I think, probably a good cost, a good expenditure. Yeah, God doesn't need night vision goggles. He sees just as well in the darkness as he does in the day. And David is saying, I have tried going up in the air all the way to heaven. God is already there. In my mind, I tested going down in a tunnel underground. He's there. I tried going east, flying as far east as I could go. And when I opened the cockpit door, God was there. So I tried west. Now I'm going to try the dark. But God sees in the dark too. And now, verse 13, the tenor, the tone, the attitude begins to shift a little bit. And notice what kind of meditations, what kind of thoughts cause the shift in attitude in David's heart and mind. So in verse 13, and this is starting now, the thoughts of God. For you formed my inward parts. You wove me in my mother's womb. I will give thanks to you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works, and my soul knows it very well. So he begins to think about God's thoughts, and particularly what kind of thoughts, what's the nature of this? What is David discussing in 13, 14, 15, and 16? So, a baby developing in his mother's womb. And David is thinking, that was me. And how did I get here again? Well, God. And the language that David uses is very interesting. Look at the end of verse 13. What language is this? You wove me. It's the word to weave or to braid. And it's the picture of a craftsman or a craftswoman taking different strands of yarn and pulling them together into a pattern. And David says, that's what you did with me when I was unborn, while I was a baby in my mother's womb. You formed my inward parts. You wove me in my mother's womb. I will give thanks to you. This is the first time in this psalm that David has said, I will give thanks to you. The front half, he seemed a little defensive, a little almost resentful. But as he contemplates the knowledge of God, that God's presence, you can never outrun God's presence. And the knowledge of God is such that God knows us better than we know ourselves. David begins to say, you know what? This is pretty incredible. That God not only knows me this well, but he's the one who made me. He designed me. Every part of me, God knows all about. Verse 14, I'll give thanks to you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. We could park right there and spend a long time. There are lots of different kinds of resources that are really magnificent to talk about the different systems in the human body that God designed to cause us to function flawlessly. And many of these writers, biblical science writers, have done a great job describing, for example, human eyesight. The eye is so complex. There are so many parts, so many different features of the human eye, that to think about the thing evolving by chance mistakes is ludicrous. Or think about human blood. Have you ever thought about how human blood works? We've got to have blood. What's the primary job of blood in our bodies? Carrying oxygen. It carries oxygen from our lungs, pumped through the bloodstream by our heart to every part of our body, because you have to have oxygen to metabolize carbohydrates, to have energy, to move an arm, or to turn your head, or to think. And so oxygen has to be moving through your body all the time. But blood does so many other things. It carries away waste from the metabolism process from individual cells. It also helps in the healing process. White blood cells, they're guardians. They attack infections. And how about platelets? Platelets cause coagulation. So when you get cut, platelets form a scab. But there are very extremely complex chemical and electrical and protein events that occur, so the blood coagulates at the right time and not at the wrong time. So you don't want blood coagulating, clotting, inside your blood vessels, because that'll kill you. But if your blood doesn't clot when you get a bad cut, you'll bleed to death. All of these systems have been designed by God, and they are fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works, and my soul knows it very well. So David is saying, as I think about this, your power, your hand, your marvelous, miraculous making of things is wonderful. Verse 15, my frame was not hidden from you when I was made in secret and skillfully wrought in the depths of the earth. He's using language now, very, very powerful, very beautiful language to talk about a secret project that silversmiths and goldsmiths and craftspeople might be making in a hidden chamber somewhere. And they're very meticulously designing and putting together all the parts and pieces of it. But he's using this to describe the development of the human baby in the mother's womb. And it goes on to say in verse 16, your eyes have seen my unformed substance. When David was just a couple of cells in his mother's womb, God was watching. You can see why anti-abortion Christians love to turn to Psalm 139 to talk about life at conception, and life starts the very moment that a baby is conceived. That is a child, and God is watching that baby. It is a human baby. It is not just a clump of cells. Now, verse 16 also introduces us to something else that's kind of intriguing. David says, your eyes have seen my unformed substance, and in your book were all written the days that were ordained for me, when as yet there was not yet one of them. What is he saying there in the second half of that verse?
God had plans for exactly how long he was going to live on this earth.
That is one of the most liberating verses in the whole Bible. Did you know that? There are so many people who spend all kinds of money and all kinds of time and effort trying to live longer. Supplements and diet regimens and all kinds of things. And they spend all their waking hours and all their effort trying to extend their life. And there's a whole bunch more people who are just absolutely anxious about death. They hate thinking about death, but they actually think about death a lot. And they're always worried about when they're going to die and how they're going to die. And it takes up a lot of their energy. Friends, we don't have to be like that at all. We have the antidote to that, and it's this. God has already written down in his book the days that he has numbered for each one of us. He's already got it figured out. He's got his date book, and it's already got noted in that book how long you and I are going to live. If he has it figured out, then I don't even have to think about it. I can just live my life. I can just do what I need to do. I don't have to think about, oh no, what if I die tomorrow? What if I die next year? What if I... No, I'm not saying be stupid and don't make any preparations. I think it probably makes sense to have life insurance. At a certain point, it probably makes sense to buy a funeral plot. That makes sense. But we don't have to obsess over trying to stay alive or worry about death, because God has already marked in his notebook how long each one of us is going to live. That frees us up to live. Verse 17, how precious also are your thoughts to me, O God. Do you see the difference in tone now from where he was before? Before he's saying, you know, I don't really like the idea that you can look into my head. And I'm trying to run away, but I find out you're there ahead of me. And where can I go so I can turn the lights out and you can't see me? Give me some privacy, God, he seems to be saying. But now he's saying, when I think about your thoughts, I realize this is awesome. This is wonderful. This is amazing. You, God, are thoroughly and totally amazing. How precious also are your thoughts to me, O God. So there's value in God's thoughts. Not only that, but God's thoughts are immense. How vast is the sum of them? I can't keep up, he says. If I were to try to count them, verse 18, they would outnumber the sand. So he says, not only are your thoughts individually precious and valuable, but all of your thoughts are so many. Is there anything that God hasn't thought about? No. Actually, his thoughts would be infinite then, wouldn't they? The last line of verse 18 is very interesting. In some sense, it seems like it doesn't quite fit. But it does if you ponder it for a minute. When I awake, I am still with you. You have to kind of think about what does that imply? What does that suggest? When I am awake, what would that imply? When I'm awake. That he's been sleeping. And when he says, I am still with you, what would that suggest?
That he was thinking of God as he was sleeping?
Sure, that he was thinking of God as he was sleeping, and God was thinking of him. and God was with him while he was asleep. And now that he's awake, God is still with him.
I always thought of it different. I kind of thought of it as like spiritual sleep. So like he was with God, then he was like spiritually asleep, but God was still with him.
That could be, it's possible. The term awake could be used metaphorically for, some kind of mental or spiritual. The New Testament correlate, you do find places where God says, wake up. But it could also be, because he was talking about darkness a couple verses ago, it could be physical. It could be that he fell asleep. And while he was asleep, he recognizes God was with him, protecting him. Remember, you can't run away from him. He's got his hands right over you. He's watching all the time. And so while he was asleep, God was watching. And now that he's awake, God is still with him. Could be either one. Verse 19. Now, this definitely seems like a shift. Once again, there's a reason for this. This is not, a totally different poem. It's all the same poem. So let's see if we can figure out why David would shift his tone and what he's talking about in verse 19. Oh, that you would slay the wicked, O God. Depart from me, therefore, men of bloodshed. For they speak against you wickedly, and your enemies take your name in vain. Do I not hate those who hate you, O Lord? And do I not loathe those who rise up against you? I hate them with the utmost hatred. They have become my enemies. That's weird. So what's going on? What kinds of things has David been thinking about and talking about in relation to God? What sort of attributes of God has he been mulling over?
That God is his protector.
Okay, God's a protector.
God sees and knows everything.
God is omniscient. He knows all things. Omnipresence. God can be anywhere that he wants to be. Okay, creative power. God makes human life. God is in charge of human life. But he hasn't said a lot in verses 1 through 18. He has not expressly said a lot about God's moral attributes. God is good. God is righteous. God is compassionate. God is gracious. God is holy. He hasn't said a lot about that. But when you're talking about the God of the Bible, when you're talking about the true God, Jehovah, God is both sovereign, master, God, creator, king, and 100% pure grace and love and mercy and kindness. He's both. So you can't really talk about, dissecting, cutting a line through God's character and leaving this over here, and then we're going to talk about this part over here, because God is one. And so as David has been meditating on God's knowledge and God's presence and God's creative power, it actually leads him to think about the kind of people around him, the kind of people that he's looking at down here on earth on a horizontal level. And he's been thinking about God and God's power. And, there was a time when I kind of wanted to run away from God. I didn't like it that he could see me all the time. And I was a little resentful that he knew what I was going to say. But now that I've thought about it, now that I've meditated on God and his sovereignty and his power, I realize that God is not only all-powerful, all-knowing, but he's also righteous, and he's holy, and he's good. And when I look at people around me and I realize there are people who hate God, there are people who do not acknowledge God, there are people who do not want to live a life that glorifies God, my response to that is, I want nothing to do with them. I want to keep them a long ways away. His meditation about who God is has brought him to the point of applying it to people around him. But he's not quite done. he has a prayer that he prays in the last couple of verses. Notice what it is. Verse 23, "Search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my anxious thoughts, and see if there be any hurtful way in me, and lead me in the everlasting way." David has done a 180-degree turn. Back in verse 1, he started out by saying, "O Lord, you have searched me and known me." And then he goes on to say, "When I sit down, when I rise up, and sitting, standing, and you know my thoughts, and before I say anything, you know what's on my tongue." Now, what is David praying and asking God to do in verses 23 and 24?
That he will search him
Yeah.
and bring to his attention if he's doing anything that he shouldn't.
You nailed it, that's it. Now his prayer is, instead of, "Lord, get off me, leave me alone. Give me a little privacy, would you? Let me live my life. Don't tell me what to do. Don't always be hovering over my shoulder." Now he says, "Lord, would you please check me out? Would you take a look inside, see if there's something in me that isn't quite right? If there's anything in me that could damage my fellowship with you, if there's something, some motive, some thought, some habit, some relationship that would damage my walk with you, I would like you to show it to me." So instead of trying to run and hide from God, and instead of being resentful that God knows all these things about him, David is now saying, "Lord, would you please search me, try my heart, test me, and let me know, show me if there's something there that shouldn't be there." Very powerful psalm, isn't it? Very, very powerful psalm. There's a lot of theology. God is a sovereign. God is the architect of human life. God is, he can be present anywhere that he wants to make his presence felt. He knows all things. So there's a lot of theology, but there's also a lot of practical information. Like, one of the things that can help us when we're feeling out of sorts, when things aren't quite right in our heads or our hearts, one of the things that can help is to meditate on the thought that God made me in my mother's womb. He wove me together. He designed me. He knows me through and through. And as I think about that, my response should be, "Your works are wonderful. Everything that you plan is just right." And even thinking about end of life. You numbered my days before there's even one of them. And so I don't have to think about death. I can leave that in your hands, and it frees me up to live for you. I don't have to get up every day and say, "What if I died today?" So what if I do? I'm in his hands. So, other thoughts, comments, questions on Psalm 139?